I got a call a night after practice, after I couldn't get a hold of him, which felt like forever. Finally get a hold of him. It was in January of 2022. And he says, "Dad, I'm done with you. I'm tired of being controlled. I'm moving in with mom across state. Peace out." And I remember that night going into his empty bedroom and just staring off and be like, well, what now? It felt like the entire last 14 years of the football, the scouts, the homework, the effort, the time, the energy, everything was just slipping away. And I was losing my son.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads, where being mediocre is a choice and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. I'm your host, Queon. I go by Q, of course. And on this episode of Mediocre Dads, I'm joined by a guest named Thomas. He said his last name, and I'm not going to say it because I'm
Pfanner.
probably Pfanner. There we go. I knew I was going to butcher it. I knew it. And I was like, he told me something was silent. And for whatever reason, it's just escaping me right now. But anyway, got Thomas on, and, guys, I've checked out a lot of his stuff, and it's awesome, right? And we'll get into it, but kind of the brief synopsis on my end of how I interpreted a lot of his things was there's a man out there who had an experience, and rather than just sitting in that area of just like, I refuse to change and it's not my fault, it's someone else's fault. He overcame that change, figured out what he needed to fix, and he's doing the thing, and now he's out here helping other dads, helping other men grow and show them, hey, we can always be better. And that's the whole Mediocre Dads, structure, if you will, right? Is all we can always improve. But before we get too much into it, hey, Thomas, can you kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Thomas Pfanner. I was a middle school PE teacher for 7 years, and I became a dad at 18 years old. My son Charles was born, and I was talking to Q before we hit record, and it was, the long story short is, his mom and I are not compatible people, and it was never meant to be. We were dated in high school, and so Charles's whole life, he's never had his parents together, which in some ways that kind of helped, because there was never like, oh, should we try to repair? It was just always focused on Charles. And when Charles was in 8th grade, I'm going to fast forward you a little bit. When he was in 8th grade, his mom was living across the state. We're in Oregon, about 2.5 hours away. And when that happened, he decided to live with me. So he lived with me, my wife, Megan, and my 2-year-old daughter. At the time, she was 2, Maddie. And things were going well. I was coaching his football team. I was helping him find work. He's passing his classes. On the surface, things were going real nice. But we hit an icy patch. Like, we all have those moments as dads. We all have the storms that we run into. And I ran into a storm with Charles. It might have been combined, with him having a breakup with his girlfriend. But he felt like I was pushing him into a box. And as a result, I got a call I was coaching high school wrestling at the time. I got a call a night after practice, after I couldn't get a hold of him, which felt like forever. Finally get a hold of him. It was in January of 2022. And he says, "Dad, I'm done with you. I'm tired of being controlled. I'm moving in with mom across state. Peace out." And I remember that night going into his empty bedroom and just staring off and be like, well, what now? It felt like the entire last 14 years of the football, the scouts, the homework, the effort, the time, the energy, everything was just slipping away. And I was losing my son. And there was no teachers to talk to. Charles wasn't there to talk to. The only person that I could shift or change was me and my own leadership. So in that season, Charles lived with me for about 9 months. And 9 months, 9 months later, after I went through this journey of reassessing and reprogramming how I operated as a leader to create the space for him to lean back in and rebuild that relationship with me just so I could have the time with him, right? We got a 50-50 parenting plan dialed in with the contingency that I moved out to Central Oregon, which meant leaving my teaching job, leaving a home that we owned, all those things to make this jump and sacrifice for him to be out here. So that's how the snowball of Dads Who Lead was started. It started with me going through a struggle and saying like, hey, you know what? There are other dads out there that are going through this same trouble, this same challenge of feeling their teenagers pull away.
Man, and that is, it's crazy to hear for me, because when I hear that, I think to myself, I don't know what I would do in that situation. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you went through it, you've already lived it, if you will. But for me, I don't know what I would do in that situation, where I imagine it's just you feel completely powerless and just like, what's next? What does it? It's almost like, and it's a kind of an absurd question, but you're like, what happens tomorrow? You know, and obviously tomorrow comes. You do what you need to do, but it's just the kind of this like, where do we go from here? So, kind of going back and kind of starting the beginning, when you said you were 18 when you had your son.
Yes.
And
yes.
And what were your parents' role? Were they there in your life? What did they say? How did that go for you?
Great question. Yeah, I've only gotten this question one other time. And it was actually my mom that I told about it when we found out that, his mom was pregnant. And family history, before I even get into the way that my mom responded, you got to find out why. My mom's daughter, my sister, Anna, she would have been about 3 years older than me, 3 or 4. I honestly don't remember exactly. She died at 6 weeks old.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so that was in the 80s. I was born in 88. It was sometime earlier in the 80s. My older sister died when she was 6 weeks old. And then when my dad had adopted a son from Thailand. And about 8 months before I was born, he drowned in a canoeing accident. So my parents are coming from the experience of losing 2 children.
Yeah.
And so she's just like, wow, like that life is really special. And that gave me a lot of support. Like, okay, like I'm not alone. Like I never was like expected them to do much other than support me. Really, that's what they did. It was I stayed at home for a little while, and when I was going to college and working to provide for Charles, because that was all after when I was 18 and knew he was going to be born in September. After I graduated high school, I was like, well, I guess I need to start working and earning some money to be able to provide for my son. So I was doing all kinds of landscaping and irrigation and demo, like whatever jobs I could find over the summer just to make some money. I didn't know how much money I was going to need. I just knew that I'd probably need to be providing some money. So I went out and I hit it. So they supported me there. They supported me. I mean, there was some court stuff early on trying to get time with Charles. So they supported me in just finding, especially that we didn't spend a bunch of money on an attorney, but enough to get some advice and get some momentum so that I could have that time and relationship with them from a young age.
Man. And so when your parents say, hey, that's a precious life and we're going to, we'll help you. And getting that reassuring feeling, did it give you that sense of hope of okay, I can do this dad thing, not knowing completely, obviously, what you're getting yourself into at that time. And 18, we do kind of think we have the world figured out for the most part. But did it give you that feeling of okay, I can do this dad thing? I've seen my dad do the dad thing with me. So I know I can do the dad thing.
It's a good question. I think more than anything that gave me confidence, and I have another friend, Miguel Mendoza, who became a dad at a young age, and he had a lot of confidence as well. I had nephews and nieces. My siblings are a lot older than me. So like even from the age of 7 all the way up, there were young kids around. My sister specifically, Robin and Lori, had young kids. So I was used to, I knew how to change a diaper. I knew how to hold a baby. I knew how to do all that because I was around the kids. So it wasn't, and this is what I hear a lot of dads start fatherhood and they've never held a baby before. They don't have experience in flight time. So they're trying to figure it all out on the fly. So having that experience, just spending a little bit of time with young kids and doing some babysitting when I was younger, gave me confidence to be like, all right, well, like I could figure this out. Like if there's people have been being fathers for hundreds of thousands of years, like this, like there's no perfect way to do it. Like it's a solvable problem.
Yeah. Did your dad ever tell you or have that? Did you and your dad ever have this conversation where it was, hey, no one taught me how to be a dad, and it's just kind of something that you figure out? I mean, I don't imagine maybe initially, but even now, right? Because I asked that question because, going into this, the dad thing, no one, I had my first daughter in 2018. I was 22. Yes. Yeah, 22. And, okay. and no one, but no one, my dad didn't sit me down and say, okay, son, this is what it's like to be a dad. And these are some of the things you're going to struggle with, or these are some of the things questions you might have. My dad didn't sit me down and do that, right? Neither did my father-in-law. It was like, hey, I've seen the man that you are. It's in the man that I believe you're capable of becoming. Now you just need to continue being that and doing that, and you'll be just fine. And it was, go ahead. No, I was going to say, it's just nerve-wracking because it was like, I don't know what I'm doing good. And I don't know if you question some of the things, some of my actions, I'm just like, by you telling me, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm kind of like, okay, that's a lot of pressure to just fail right now. So I don't know what it was like for you, but at that point, did your dad ever have that conversation with you?
No, I don't recall him having that specific conversation with me. I think my dad, he struggled to he's a worker. He's a doer. He's a take action. Let's go do a thing. Let's go learn to sail. Let's volunteer. Socially, and I'm kind of cut from the same cloth. Like I'm naturally, which is as a coach, if you're a dad out there, you're like, hey, I'm not a social type. I'm not somebody who likes to sit around and talk around a water cooler. I'm the same way. I taught PE. I wrestled. I do think like the more I can be doing something so that I can fill in gaps of not having these awkward moments, the better. And I think that's kind of why my dad was. So we didn't have a lot of those types of talks. And I think they would have been beneficial had I had them. But really, Q, to be honest, there was so much tension between the two sides. Charles' mom's family, I remember getting a call like after he was born. There was this plan like, hey, yeah, we'll call you, come over, and we'll figure out a plan to be able to see him. And then after he was born, like maybe a week after, I get a call. Long story short, from somebody in her family saying like, we think he would have like other male role models with his uncle and his grandfather, and we think he's probably just better off if you're just not involved. And you can imagine, I was like, fuck that. Like, no, like I've already worked all summer, for this child. Like I knew this child was mine, and like I think conception is underrated. Like that's when you know that this is happening. Mm-hmm. And I've mentioned everything in our family history about, losing kids. I wasn't going to lose Charles. And that tension, luckily, I had sent based on, what the attorney's advice was, I sent a little bit of money during the pregnancy. And those checks were deposited. And so I had a paper trail saying like evidence. So like I was involved as a dad, like she accepted money with these written letters saying that I'm the dad. I want to kick you some money for this. So I had some legal leverage to get my foot in the door. But if I hadn't done that, I might not even know Charles.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's even the first year of like figuring out how much time am I going to have with Charles? What's the parenting plan look like? There's so much stress that went into that the stress of like being a dad, like this part's easy compared to the fight. Like, yeah.
Okay. And so when you going back, I guess at that point when you find out that she's pregnant and you're going to be a dad and she's going to be a mom, was there tension? Or was there things going on between you two that was like, hey, this relationship's not going to work out, or we're going to try to make it work because we're about to be parents together, and is that the catalyst of how that, I imagine, going the legal battle thing started, or was it just something that just happened over time as she was pregnant?
Yeah. So to answer your question, let's see here. I think we dated for a couple months before she got pregnant.
Oh, okay.
And maybe a couple months after she got pregnant.
Yeah.
And then it was just, I'm always looking to improve my skills as a husband, father, all that, right? I don't see a scenario, one, with her personality that it would work, but also my skill set at 18 to understand women and understand how to provide in the right way. Like, neither of us were ready to, actually our pastor a few weekends ago was talking about time being single and like God. Yeah. I don't know. We didn't really talk much about God, but Jesus is a part of my life. So sometimes he comes into the conversation.
No, 100%. It's a huge part of my life.
Our pastor Anthony had like the Kraft single, like you put on a hamburger, the cheese. And he's like, God makes us as a single, and until we're ready, if we're not ready and mature enough to join and and we haven't found out who we are on our own, that we're not going to be ready to join into a marriage or a serious relationship. And that's kind of how it was, I think, ultimately for us as young teenagers about to be parents. Is it was just like neither of us were really had the skill sets or had established who we were to anchor into something like that.
Man, okay. So I asked it because I'm just trying to build understand better the relationship with the mom or with Charles's mom. So
did
you guys go through like a custody battle, or was there like was there court just to say, hey, this is our plan, or you used what do they call it, a mediator? I guess using it like a lawyer as a mediator to say, hey, I'm the mediator. What is it that you guys want to bring to the table? What is it you want? What is it you want? And then we meet in the middle as much as we can and say, boom, this is what our plan is as far as being parents or co-parenting with this child.
Q, I'll be totally direct with you. I've been through about every custody, mediation, court hearing, depositions, judgment hearing, like almost every imaginable court situation for custody I've been through.
Wow.
So the first one, when Charles was like a few months old, like 10 months old, I think we set up. It was me, Charles's mom, Laura, her mom, in their living room, talking about a plan that we wrote on paper and ended up turning into the court. And the one thing, it was pretty minimal about the amount of time and it probably wasn't best. I could have fought to get a lot more time. I ended up getting more time with Charles just because Laura was like, hey, I need to go do the thing. Can you watch him? Yes.
Yeah.
So I ended up having more than what was on the plan. But that first one, as far as what I was entitled to in the court's eyes, was very limited. But the one good thing I had in there was like once Charles is 6 or 7, we would set up a new plan, because it's like, how are we going to make an 18-year plan? Like,
Yeah.
We don't know if one of us could have kids, one could be married. Like, we're talking about 6 years. Like, who knows what's going to happen next?
So many factors involved in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we did have another one, and it was like a full custody battle, witnesses, attorneys. It was deep.
Did she try to take custody from you at any point? Like, say, I want full custody, you get zero?
So custody in state of Oregon, it essentially gets decisions on three points. School decision, like major school decisions. What school are they going to be enrolled in? Religious decisions and non-emergency medical. So it's critical, if you're a dad listening to this trying to figure out custody, that you understand what custody is in the court's eyes, but then also what custody is in the mom's eyes or your eyes. Because in Laura's case, she believed that custody meant I get final say on everything, at least in her mind, right? Like, so legally she didn't, but in her mind she did. Like, I have full custody of Charles, therefore I get to decide. Like, well, no, that's not the way this works. And I'd fight her on it, and usually it would work out. But having that clarity, and ideally you have, I think honestly the best for kids is joint custody 50-50, both parents. That's statistically the best. If you can make that happen. If you can agree on those major decisions, that's, I think, the best way to go. But every situation is different. Absolutely. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it did. 100%. And I guess, so now I'm picturing a timeline in my head. You got married and had your daughter.
Yes.
Before Charles was moved in with you at 15, yes. I think you said. So yeah. What was that like? Because I mean, I imagine, you have this thing in your life going on still. It's not like Charles is not in the picture or can never be in the picture or will never be in the picture again. So what was that like for you? You're getting ready, you're a husband at this point, and then, your wife says, hey, I'm pregnant, you're going to have a daughter. What's the thought process? Do you think about Charles? Do you think about how the relationship's going to be with Charles and your daughter? Do you think about the relationship between, your, not going to use, I don't want to use the term baby mama, but Charles's mother and then and your wife. Is what it is. But do you think, are these things that you're thinking about as when you hear this news and you're becoming a father again for the second time, or is it just more of like, you know what, it is what it is, I'll figure it out?
So just to I'll kind of catch the audience up too on the story, on my story. When Charles was about 5 or 6, Megan and I got married. And shortly after we got married, actually, we were living in Monmouth, Oregon, which was about an hour away. So it was pretty close to Eugene. I was going back and seeing Charles like 2 nights a week. Typically, I would go back and see him like Friday, Saturday night every week. Yeah. So I was still pretty involved. But Megan's like, hey, he's going to be starting kindergarten. I think we need to be closer to him. And so we made the move from Monmouth down to Eugene. I started, doing stuff for getting ready for a teaching program. And that's when we kind of had a big shift in custody the first time. I think that's probably, like, the custody battle is probably a whole nother podcast there. But when I remember, when coming back to your question about like when Maddie was born, and that was when Charles was going into 6th grade, beginning of middle school. So he would have been like 11, 12. It was really exciting when Maddie was born, because I was like, I got to be there. I got to be there in the room. It was, even though she was my second child, it was the first time I got to be there with the mom, like fully as the dad experience, to be there. It was amazing. But I recall when I found out, I was like, oh my gosh. I was honestly more nervous the second time than the first time. because like after having the experience with Charles, I was like, maybe subconsciously, she's an amazing woman, totally different personality than Laura. It was still a little nervous, and I was even more nervous after I found out I was going to have a daughter. So it was, but as Charles, he got in fold, he became, another big brother, and he had a lot of pride around that. So it's all been an amazing journey with getting him tied in to our family. Amazing, maybe, and tremendously challenging. But I feel I'm so blessed to have Megan because she's patient. Her and Charles do not get along great all the time. It's getting better. Most of the time they do. And she's learning as I'm learning to improve the skill of leadership and understand her role, and, creating a space for Charles here where he's like, this is a place for him to refresh, focus on his goals. And now that he just turned 17, awesome. It's like, we want to stay out of the way as much as we can, but still say like, hey, this is the boundaries that we expect. And that's, one of the big things we talk about in Dads Who Lead is becoming the main character in your own story so that your kids learn from you how to do that as well. And Charles is very much a main character. He defies being a role character. He does not like sitting in a classroom. He does not like being on somebody else's schedule. He wants to be on his schedule. And so, which is going to be awesome when he's an adult, but it is difficult for the next year.
The learning experience as you're a teenager and the teacher's like, well, I'm still the adult in the room, so sit down. No, I totally, I've been there. That was me. I don't, you want me to what? Sit down for 8 hours and, going from class to class? Absolutely not. I am not doing this. It was bad. I made it through high school, but I refused to go to college purely for the simple fact of like, I cannot sit here and go to school all day, and I just don't understand the purpose behind it. I just refuse to do it. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up joining the Army, because I was like, I couldn't do that. But nonetheless, I was like, I got to be doing so. I have ADHD, so like it was, I have combined, so it's the hyperactive and the attention deficit. So like, I can focus. I can sit down and focus. But it's going to be really hard because my focus is going to be like, hey, I need to sit here. And how long do I need to sit here? I'm going to give myself 20 minutes, and I'm just going to just keep going from there. I'm not paying attention to this person who's talking to me right now and who's telling me about the math or science, whatever. It was totally difficult for me. But we're not here to talk about me. But it was just one of those things where I totally understand that. I just refuse. So your relationship with Charles then, right? Because I want to get into your relationship and then also his relationship with Megan a little bit more. But your relationship with Charles, right? So that father-son relationship, that bonding, right? Because every father imagines, hey, when I have my first kid, it's going to be a son. And when he's a son, man, he's going to be just like me. We're going to be catching the ball together. We're going to be going to the barbershop together, to get our haircuts. He's going to be around me. He's going to learn from me. It's just this. We get this fantasy of just life is just going to be blissful. And this, don't get me wrong, it is a bliss at times, but we're living in reality. Kids do not have the same understanding that we do, so they do kid things that can be infuriating to us as adults and as parents. And so like, what was that like for you guys, you and Charles? Would you guys have that father-son bond where it was like, man, me and him we're the same, we get it, we're just knocking it out, or did that come over time?
I would honestly have to answer that as it's come in waves.
Okay.
It's very much come in waves. So I remember dressing up in our superhero costumes when he was like kindergarten, first grade, and going to the corn maze. So typically the corn maze, like the haunted corn maze, you would go to at nighttime. I just took him like after, this is when kindergarten was a half day. Took him after kindergarten one day and took him out to a corn maze and ran through, and we had our costumes on and nobody else did. And I was like, who cares? We're just having a good time. I think he was like Spider-Man and I was Wolverine. So that's kind of the first example of what you're talking about. And then got him into scouts when he started. Yeah, kindergarten, first grade. I don't remember exactly when he started scouts. But we got in that. I coached his football team. So there were a lot of moments where he was there and he was in. But then also there's plenty of times when Charles has been super irritated with me, has felt very boxed in and forced and pressured. And why are you on me about this? And hey, like, why is it you're holding me to this performance and you don't care what I think? You're just telling me what you want me to do. And I'm not you. I'm on my own path. So that's, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's probably more of it where we're together if you look back, but it doesn't, as a dad, the sting of feeling like you're losing your kids, losing specifically Charles, which sometimes it was Charles pulling away from me and sometimes it was Laura pulling Charles away from me. But it's been like this like an ocean wave going in and out. And I've got to the point, Q, where it's like, I know the wave's going to come back out and it's going to come back in if I just trust myself and trust God and my skills and everything that I've done to build the relationship with Charles that's founded on a lot of the things you mentioned. Us training martial arts together, us going on adventures, and even going back. Like, he doesn't care. Like, this is a big thing. Being a dad is a lot more like staying fit than it is like building a house.
Yeah.
Because you could have run a marathon 3 years ago, but that doesn't mean shit right now.
100%.
It's, like, you could have gone on a huge, like, Charles, like, remember in grade school we did all those Kid Scout campouts? Like, yeah, I don't care any of that anymore. Like, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
So, but as dads, and we're looking at, okay, how can we be intentional with the craft of fatherhood, spending time with our kids, even if it's playing a game of chess, how can I do something with them today?
Yeah.
That's going to create a positive impact for them.
I tried to, when I thought of so I had my first daughter in 2018,
Yes.
and I thought to myself, like, okay, in the beginning, I was like, me and my wife were like, hey, it's gonna be a boy, it's gonna be a son, and it's gonna be great. And like I said, everything I explained is like this. I truly, in my head, I created this image, this fantasy of when he 1 through 5, 5 through 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and so on and so forth. But those were the main years in which I created in my head. I was like, this is what it's going to look like. And at 12 and 15, it's going to be the first time he's ready to fight me. So then, I don't do crazy things, but at the same time, fun things and whatever the case might be. Find out we're having a daughter. And in my head, internally, I'm a little broken because, I had built it up in so much that I believe that, every man naturally has a son first, and then you go from, and then you have daughters or whatever, but it's natural to have the son first. And if you don't, then it's just like, what does that look like? What does that mean? But God works in mysterious ways, and I'll make this point, then I'll make my second point. But he works in mysterious ways because he knows what we need, and he knew that I needed patience, among other things, but mainly needed patience. And it's harder to learn patience when you have a son versus daughters, because when you have daughters, they're so precious, and this, right? Having a daughter, they're so precious, and you don't want to ever disturb the innocence or the preciousness, or you don't want to be the reason why they're afraid. You know what I mean? So that anger that comes in, and when you want to yell, you're like, hold on, I don't want them to be afraid of me. I want them to love me, but I also need them to understand what they're doing is wrong, right? So it forces you to rethink things rather than having that initial knee reaction, like, I gotta respond, I got to do this. And so I think it's so beautiful because that's how God did it for me. He was able to transform me to where I have 2 daughters, and I'm a lot more patient than I was before. I'm not going to say I've mastered patience anyway, but a lot more patient now. So now he's blessing me with a son. In my head, I'm just like, I'm excited, right? Because I want to have that father-son bond relationship. But then moving on to my second point, I could never think of back then in a moment and growing up where I had this everything was bliss, and me and my dad just had this father-son moment, this movie style moment where you're like, yeah, that family sitcom you're watching, you're like, yep, that's what every father-son relationship looks like right there. And there's some laughing, there's some pain, there's some anger, but then, dad comes back at the end of the day, says, you know what, son, this is the lesson I'm trying to teach you. And what I want to learn. The son's like, you know what, dad, you're right. You got so much wisdom and it's all great. I never remember that because, like I'm a twin. I have an identical twin brother. Me and him we were adopted by an all-white family. And those are our parents. That's our family. And I can tell you, I can remember I would try to challenge my dad because I wanted to feel like I was a man. And so I'd push the boundary. I would try to push the boundary, especially as I got older. I was like, you know what? No, I'm a man and he needs to respect me as such. And so don't get me wrong. There were moments where they were great. And I remember I laughed and it was awesome. I do remember it was nothing like what I made up in my head. It was, my dad realized that while he had his responsibilities to raise me and bring me up and to be a great man, it's a lot of teaching, and it's a lot of patience and teaching and educating and really showing and demonstrating through your actions of what that looks like, or what being a man looks like, rather than having these movie sitcom moments where they're sitting on the front porch with their hand over his shoulder, like, son, I love you. Life's going to be great. And then the sun goes down and everything disappears and there's a music track playing, right? It's not always that. And so for you, I kind of wanted to understand the relationship between Charles, because I imagine, the wave tops, that's reality. That's real. Like, it's not everything's going to be that flashy moment. And so Charles is yours, you have that relationship and you guys have the wave tops and you guys do your thing. But for Megan, you and your wife,
yes,
how was that? How did you incorporate her into his life to say, like, hey, she's not your mom, like she who your mother is, right?
Yes,
but she is still a woman in your life, that are in my life, who I don't need you to call her mom, I don't need you to call her stepmom, but I need you to respect her. How did that go? How was that?
Man, how did it go? How is it going?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, Charles and I think at a young age, when Megan and I started dating, I believe Charles was 3. So, okay, pretty damn close to his full life, she's been around. And he has admitted that he's like, man, it wasn't when he was really young. It was like more probably middle school, late grade school kind of like stuff. And he's like, I tried to scare her off. I tried to run her off and she just wouldn't go. And so finally I was like, man, all right, well, she's not going. So I guess I'm stuck with her. But Megan's evolved tremendously. So Charles and Megan have very opposite personalities. And this is how I mean. There are different personality profiles. Megan's is very anchored into caring about others. Mm-hmm. She's very concerned about how other people feel, they're comfortable, that she's not making anybody upset, and that she has, like, the relationship side is really important to her. And to Charles, he's the opposite. He cares about, what am I going to get out of this? How can this benefit me? Like, yeah, he has friends he cares about, but the way that they operate, like, Megan will say something like, doesn't he think about how that's going to affect how other people feel or what? It's like, no, he doesn't care about if that decision impacts somebody. Like, he's thinking about how can it benefit him, which there's times for both, right? They're both, but they can see that they clash. I'll tell you this story about Charles. We just, like, for his 17th birthday, we drove from here to Utah. It was about an 8-hour drive for a UFC 307.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a fighter there who is one of the champions. And Charles is not a fan of this champion because he doesn't try to win by finish. He's like, he's somebody who like typically wins by decision.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's a line like meet and greet, right? Before this wasn't somebody that was fighting. It was Bilal Muhammad, who was the welterweight champion. And he says, I'm going to ask him if he's ever won a street fight by split decision. I'm like, okay. So
move. I'll step back, but go for it.
So he did it, and he recorded it, and he put it up on TikTok, and all these people are like, that's so disrespectful, and I can't believe you did that. A lot of people were like, oh, that's hilarious. You like, anyway, he had a good laugh, but like for him, and he will put himself out there to offend other people if it gains him some traction. And so him and Megan are so different in that way that their personalities can clash. That I got to give a lot of props to Megan, especially the last year or so, to understanding, like, for her, because one of our principles in Dads Who Lead, if you're listening, we have what calls the Forge Pyramid. The second level is ownership. And for a while, Megan was like kind of victim mentality, and he's the problem. I can't change anymore. And as soon as she's like, you know what? Okay, I will open my heart and I will see what else I can do. As soon as that happened, she was able to see, like, okay, how can I connect with Charles in a way that's not, I'm not here to be his mom. I'm going to yield to Thomas if there's any parenting that way. Because I have more, this is getting more into our philosophy with Dads Who Lead. As a dad, his birth dad, I have a lot more leadership capital than she does.
Yeah.
So if something needs to be said, I have a lot more space. He can be mad at me and I can come back from it pretty quickly. Yeah. But if he's mad at her, it's going to take a lot more time. Yeah. So that's something, like, if you're a dad listening and you have a wife who's playing stepmom to a teenage son or teenage daughters, it is tough. It's a tough role for them to be in because they can see things and they want to help. And it's from a space of love, but they don't always have the leadership capital. And when that's not there and the teenager isn't ready to listen to what stepmom, stepdad are saying, it can create tension really quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I when you were just kind of describing Charles and your wife Megan, I thought of there's a show called New Girl, and there's this scene that's on Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
And Schmidt is talking to Jess, and he goes, "Do you walk around just thinking about how other people's feelings all day?" And she goes, "Yeah, don't you?" He goes, "No. How do you get anything done?" And, it's just funny because it just kind of shows the economy of just kind of like how tendency of how women think and how men think of, and the difference in that where men are very just task oriented and I'm here to get this done. It's almost like everything is a business transaction for us. And whereas for women, the tendency is more of like, well, how can I nurture you? How can I show I care for you? How are you feeling? Are you okay? And, it's a good balance to have. It's always a great balance to have when you're raising kids, right? A mother and a father who balance each other out in that aspect. But it just made me think of that when you were describing Charles and your wife, because
yes,
I saw the video the other day and it was rent free in my head. But I think it's a perfect segue into kind of learning more about you and what you do with your, I think you said the dads who lead.
Dads Who Lead.
Dads Who Lead. Yeah. So what that is and how that transform, the creation of that for you from the beginning to where it is now as a man who's like, hey, I've been through these things and I'm of dad of hard times as a dad, and and growing and maturing and whatever the case may be. So for you, how has that changed you, but also how has it helped other people? And what is that really? What is Dads Who Lead? I know there's 3 questions in there, but I'm gonna give it to you.
Dads Who Lead, the mission is to equip dads to become the trusted and revered leaders of their home. So we're shooting really high. Like, you think about, I went to a conference this is probably when I was like 22, 21, and Mike Singletary was a linebacker for the Chicago Bears, and at the time he was the head football coach for the 49ers. And the way that some of the other coaches who were on the staff with him described it, man, when he walks in the room, you sit up straight in your chair, you look at him as somebody like, all right, this guy cares. 1, he cares about me. 2, he's a badass. I can trust him. He's convicted in what he believes, and he has a clear direction of where he's taking this team. And so when we think about being a dad, a lot of times for me, before this journey started, it was like, show up, do the best I can, and ideally, things work out well. But there wasn't an intentional direction that I was taking myself and my family. So Dads Who Lead is for dads who are like, hey, I want to be the main character in my own story so that I can show my kids how to do the same.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I didn't think that being a dad meant or equal to leadership for the longest time. And, what taught me that was my time in the military, or I say my time, but since I've been in the military and being a leader of junior soldiers and having people who look up to you and expect you to know the answer. So I was a leader. I was in the military. There's NCOs, and I became an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, and literally I was 20. I was 21. I turned 22 like a couple months later, right? But I'm 22 and I'm a sergeant. I'm a leader. I'm seen as a leader. I'm seen as I don't at the rank I was, I didn't have all the answers, but I have a good portion of the answers, and I needed to know how to conduct myself and lead soldiers. And I had this soldier who's 28 years old and who's been in the Army longer than me, but she, because of her inability to want to listen and really change, she was stuck where she was at. But here's this 22-year-old who's been in the Army going on basically 4 years, and I have to lead this 28-year-old. And, it was very hard. It was very difficult because I didn't understand. I didn't know how to do that because I didn't really know what that meant to be as a leader. And so it was crazy because I learned so much from that one soldier, and then my following soldier, which was not good at all. But I learned so much about leadership from them. I learned so much from leadership about myself and how I want to lead and what leader I want to be seen as. That when my first daughter was born, first few months was a little rough, but as she got older, it just made sense, and everything just kind of fell into line because I understood, like, okay, my daughter's not my soldier, one of my soldiers, but a lot of the principles are similar to where it's like, hey, I'm trying to help her solve a problem, and I'm here, and she's looking to me to help her solve it, and what that looks like. So that skill was very transferable for me, and I was very thankful for that, because it's kind of how I lead is being a dad, and it's because being a dad is what I know, and it's what I'm good at, and what I love doing. And so for you, since you've created this program and you're helping other dads, have you seen a change in you where you were like, man, if I never had started this, I don't know if I would have gotten to where I'm at, to where I can sit here and explain to you kind of what that means to me, or that building that forge chart that you had there.
Yes, absolutely. Because even for me, like, I use this all the time because every dad runs into storms with their family. And so when I'm in a storm, which is typically with my son, I look at this and I basically, it's if you're listening to this, it's a 5-level pyramid, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I go up the line. I'm like, all right, how am I? I'll just tell you what the 5 level. It's faith, ownership, respect, groundbreaking adventure, and expectation. Where am I with my faith? Where am I with my conviction that that I have what it takes as a dad? Because even if we have the perfect plan, if we don't deliver it with confidence, it's not going to land well. Am I taking ownership over my own results? Over what am I doing? Am I trying to lead him to something that I'm not being authentic with? Am I earning respect? Am I having adventures on a regular basis? And then am I setting clear expectations? So as I'm going through it, I look, okay, well, I'm doing the first 2, but my interactions and I'm right now in a space of mutual respect with Charles or mutual respect with one of my daughters. I need to spend more time here. That's where I need to focus today. So having taught other dads this and making it really clear helps it, even for me, when I struggle, it's like, all right, I have something to go back to and fall back on, because it's not if we're going to run into a problem, it's when. So absolutely, this journey, had I not spent as much time as I have in the craft of leadership, and it's like where I really believe God has brought me and Charles and like our whole family to uncover a lot of this to help other families, because the personality dynamics and the growth that Charles has had, but every time he grows, there's a new challenge. It's not like, oh, he's grown and now he's independent and he's perfect. Like, he grows and now he wants to do something on his own, but he's not ready for it, but he thinks he is. Yeah. And how do I manage that? And then I've got his mom on the other side saying, oh yeah, you can go do that. But then as a dad, I'm like, I'm saying no. So he's getting messages from 2 different parents. He's got to pick the one he likes the best. And I've got to figure out how to be pretty damn convicting on why going to class is the best move when maybe he's hearing other things other places.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Man, I get it. Oh man, that's funny. Senior year, I'm sorry. If your son listens, I do not mean to be a bad influence by any means. And I'm not telling him to do this. I'm not telling any kids to do this.
Yeah.
Senior year, it got to the point where I just was like, you know what? So I was it was my last class of the day. Usually it was a math class, some sort of a math class, but essentially it was teaching us about money. It was teaching us about writing checks. It was teaching us about taxes. And I was truthfully a class that I think every young person needs coming out of high school to understand more money and kind of how all that stuff works. But anyway, me being the young man that I was, who didn't care, but pretty confident in myself, was like, well, honestly, I don't need this. So he would be talking, he'd be teaching, and there'd be like 20 minutes, 30 minutes left in the class maybe. And I would just load my stuff up, and I would kind of put my phone in my pocket, get up, and I'd walk right out of the classroom. I didn't say a single thing to him, and I'd just walk out. And I remember one of my classmates was like, yo, he just like, you walked out, and he was like, what just happened? Did something happen? Is he okay? Does anybody know where he's going? They're like, no. And I would make it a point. Like, this is how brash I was. I would make it a point. I would walk all the way out, walk across the I don't know, the grass field or whatever, straight to the front where the front office was, because I parked in the front because I thought I earned that, right? Which I didn't, but that's where I parked. And I walked through the front office, and they would all see me like, oh, hey, Q, or hey, Queon, because me, twin brother, and my mom worked at my high school for a little bit, so they knew who we were. She's like, yeah. They're like, yeah, time to go. I said, yep, time to go. And walk right out the front door, and I would leave. Just because I just wanted to stick to the man and thought I knew what was right. And, I had some friends who would be like, nah, man, yeah, who cares? No big deal. But I also had some other friends who were really close to me who are still friends to this day were like, you're an idiot. Why are you doing that? Right. Like, like, so I understand that pull, that directional pull. But anyway, I have two more questions for you. And then we can wrap this thing up. My first question to you is faith being that first, the F for Forge and that, and that foundation, right? I think if I'm envisioning it correctly, the point is faith is the foundation there of that pyramid. And so is faith for you? I understand faith for you, but is it teaching faith in helping your family as well? Like, or your family believers as well? Or is it just kind of like, hey, dad's a believer, mom's a believer, but us kind of like, like, you know what I mean?
It's a great question. I've worked with dads from a variety of religious backgrounds. And as I mentioned, I'm a follower of Jesus, and faith to me is about, number one, believing that you are not a dad on accident.
Mm-hmm.
A higher power has put you in the position to be a dad and to be a leader for this young man or young woman in your life. That's number one. Number two, you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe, you have to have faith that the skills, tools, knowledge, everything that you have, you're going to use it to take whatever action it is with conviction and confidence. It's like if I'm drawing back my bow and it's a distance that I've never shot before. Like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't know if my pin's set up. Like, all this doubt starts spiraling. I'm not going to perform at my best because I'm not going to have that belief. And then the third layer of faith is, as you mentioned with the family, believing that your kids have what it takes. Because I've worked with dads who this was like a huge light bulb for them. So this might help somebody that's listening. Their son or daughter might say, oh, I'm just making this up, I want to be an astronaut. And they'd be like, dude, you can barely tie your shoes. Are you kidding me? You're not even able to pack your own lunch, And so, but when we embody, yes. And so it can be really hard, but when we embody that this child is broken, they will start to believe that they're broken. So the language, the energy, the emphasis, and it can be hard. I still have to pray and dig sometimes when my son's making making a few bad choices in a row. All right, I know what he's capable of. How can I dig back to the core of who he is that is making decisions that are tough, that other people are unwilling to make? So having faith that you're here on purpose, having faith in yourself, and having faith in your family, that's the foundation. And there is obviously a lot that can go into developing that layer, but that's the basis of what we're looking to do.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That is awesome. All right. Well, final question. You meant, you can be becoming a dad at 18 years old, and there are dads there are young people who might be going that right through, experiencing that right now, or who have experienced that, and they haven't come out the other side, just like yourself has, so are still learning, what the case might be. So if you could go back into the future and meet 18-year-old Thomas, what would be one piece of advice you would give him as far as fatherhood, right? Just to help you to say, hey, this is not going to solve all your problems, but this is going to help you maybe not have to go through so much that heartbrokenness that you might have felt, and despair you might have felt at certain times of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I still a good dad?
I would say this: ownership is very hard to take when you've done like step after step after step. No matter how bad things get, always take ownership over the outcomes and look at what you can do better for the next play. Like football example, Peyton Manning throws an interception in the first quarter. He is not going to spend the rest of the game like, man, I threw that interception. Now we're down by 7. That's going to cost us the game. We're going to lose because of me. I've done everything I can, and my team's still not where they need it. No, it's like, okay, given the team, the scenario, the position that I'm in, what is the next best move on the board? And
yeah,
I just thinking back to the moments that have been the hardest, it's when things don't go right, and I still have to look at what can I do differently, what can I do better, and what can I do next? And if you're constantly, your focus is on that, the enemy wants us to look in the past and get wrapped in shame. But like if we're looking forward towards our targets, that there is damn near nothing that we're not able to accomplish.
Yeah, man, I love it. Listen, I think it's impactful, right? Because you have an experience that not a lot of people have, but your experience has led you to be able to lead, to help other people. And so many of us wish we could go back. If we have kids who are, say, 7, 8, 9 years old, or whatever the case might be, or even older, wish we go back into the moment when we found out we're becoming dad, just to tell ourselves that one thing that would have said, hey, just remember this one thing, and it's not going to solve again, and it's not going to solve all your problems, but it definitely will be helpful, and it's definitely going to help you on some of those days when you just feel like giving up. Because I tell you guys, and I say this pretty often, but I think being a dad is the best job in the world. I knew I wanted to be a dad when I was 16 years old, and it's okay for me to say that now because I'm not longer 16. I'm 29, going on 30. But at the time, if a 16-year-old said, "Hey, I want to be a dad," obviously, girlfriend, people around you are gonna be like, "Yeah, okay, get away from me,"
Yes.
But I knew I wanted to be a dad because I knew I could accomplish so many different things in this world, whether that's professionally or even skills and all these things I've learned, right? But those don't matter. What all matters to me at the end of the day is, was I the best dad that I could be? And did I put my best foot forward? And did my kids know that I loved them and I cared and I was trying, and our dad did his best?
Yes.
And because I think dads are so important. It's an amazing experience being a dad, and it's an amazing experience being a mother too, right? And for my women out there who go when being a mother, but like for my dads, like you guys, you can tell, I can tell you, it's an amazing experience being a dad. That moment when you're sitting in the hospital and the baby comes, and we all know how babies come how they're delivered, right? If you're a dad, you understand. I'm not going to break it down for you, but we all know how babies come, right? When you're sitting there and the baby's there and reality hits you, that emotion of fear, happiness, joy, all hits you at once like a brick in the face, and you're just standing there like, I'm happy. I'm a dad now. I'm joyful because everything looks okay. Baby's okay. Wife's okay. But I'm afraid because that baby is small, and like they're out of the womb now. They're my responsibility, or the doctor's doing what they're supposed to. Is my baby going to be hurt? Am I going to hurt my baby? Is my, like all these emotions all at once. But it's just, it's so crazy that your mind finds this way to focus on that newborn and say, like, of course everything's okay. That baby, that is, you made that. You and your wife made that baby, and this, or you and your significant other made that baby, and you're going to be a dad, and you have a responsibility now. So you're going to be afraid, but you cannot let your kids see that, show them that fear, because you are now the man that you need to be, or you're stepping into becoming the man that you need to be. Yes. Man, I love it. I get passionate about being a dad. I love being a dad. I think it's great. And I can tell that you love being a dad as well. I really hope that, obviously you and Charles' relationship, obviously you guys are so father and son, it goes up, it ebbs and flows. And then when Charles gets older and he is that dad one day, I imagine you'll get several calls. It will never be, "Hey, Dad, you were right." It will just be like a subtle, like, "Hey, Dad, so you remember that thing when you did that thing? Yeah, man, look, the craziest thing happened to me." And you just scratch over the fact that you're like, you were right. But anyway, like, craziest thing happened. I did it to my dad, so I know it's 100%. It's gonna be a thing for you. I wish you the best in everything and all the endeavors that you do. But before we go, any last piece of words or wisdom you want to impart on the audience?
Yeah, if you've enjoyed this, I don't know exactly when Q is going to be releasing it. We've got the Dads Who Lead book that's going to be coming out. It's going to go deeper into my story and how to deploy the Forge Pyramid into your leadership style as a dad. So it's going to be available on Amazon. So look for that. It's Dads Who Lead.
Awesome. Hey guys, all of his stuff, all this, where you can follow him, find his website and everything will be in the description below. Don't you worry. Again, Thomas, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. And guys, as I usually say, and as you know, being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. That's all I got. Mediocre Dads out.